Chapter 7. NLP and Anchoring. NLP anchors are an easy and quick way to tune into a resourceful state of mind on demand. There is nothing better than feeling positive emotions by simply flipping a switch. In this section, you will learn about the concept of anchoring and the ways in which you can create anchors. One of the most important tools of neuro-linguistic programming that you can use to increase your self-confidence, interest, and make yourself feel relaxed is anchoring. It is a simple technique that assists you to alter any negative or unwanted feelings into something that is positive and resourceful in no time. Whenever you create an NLP anchor, you establish an involuntary response to stimulus so that you can immediately feel the way you want, whenever you want. In NLP, the word anchoring refers to a process that enables you to associate an internal reaction with an external trigger or an internal trigger so that you can easily and quickly reassess your reaction or response to such a stimulus. Anchoring is a technique that might seem quite similar to the conditioning technique that Pavlov developed. At least they seem similar on the surface. In the conditioning technique that Pavlov used, he managed to create an association between salivation in a dog on hearing a bell ring. Pavlov associated the ringing of the bell to feeding his dogs, so the dogs automatically created an association that the ringing bell signified their feeding time. Eventually, Pavlov noticed that merely by his ringing the bell, his dogs started to salivate, even when he didn't feed them. The theory rests on the premise that an external stimulus or cue can elicit a behavioral response. The association formed is said to be spontaneous and not based on choice. The behaviorist's stimulus-response conditioning formula helps condition a subject's response or behavior to a specific stimulus. In NLP, anchoring is a form of relative conditioning that includes links between various other emotions and experiences instead of restricting it to external cues or behavioral responses. For instance, the reaction or internal feeling you experience whenever you remember a particular picture will become an anchor for you. The tone of your voice can become an anchor that associates to the tone of a specific feeling like excitement or confidence. With anchoring, you have the option to establish as well as re-trigger an association for yourself. Instead of your reaction being an unconscious response, anchoring is a tool that helps with self-actualization. Anchoring is an effective tool that helps you create and restart a mental process that is associated with learning, creativity, and the ability to concentrate, as well as other important experiences. The comparison of an anchor used in NLP has certain significance attached to it. An anchor helps to stabilize a boat or a ship so that it doesn't float away and always rooted to a spot. In NLP, an anchor is a psychological anchor that helps generate a response and isn't a mechanical stimulus. If we extend the previous analogy of a ship, then in terms of human psychology, the anchor refers to an experience in our consciousness. Anchors are points of reference that help find a specific experience and hold our concentration there and prevent it from wandering away. Visualize what it will be like in an instant if you can go from feeling apprehensive to feeling confident and capable while in a stressful meeting when all eyes are focused on you or when you are dealing with a problem. That will certainly simplify your life, will it not? The concept of an NLP anchor is quite simple. It refers to a connection that exists between a stimulus and an emotional response of an individual. NLP anchors work because when a person starts to relive an intense emotion and at the peak of that experience uses a particular stimulus, then the individual forms a neurological link between the two events. As mentioned earlier, it works exactly in the manner in which Pavlov conditioned his dogs to salivate upon the ringing of a bell. We all use NLP anchors most of the time, and we do it unintentionally. For instance, a big, shiny yellow M can be an anchor for a cheap and crappy meal, and it can signify a tasty, feel-good meal. When you are driving and you approach a set of lights and suddenly it turns red, it can be an anchor for either road rage or a sense of mild frustration, according to your temperament at that instant. The good news about anchors is that you have the option of anchoring specific triggers to an emotionally positive state. It means that you can feel confident, happy, and energetic, or experience any positive emotion whenever you want to. To enable this reaction, you need to be able to use your imagination, have around 10 minutes to spare. According to the strength of the memory that you can use as an anchor can last you anywhere between a couple of weeks up to a month at a time. It is quite wonderful if you are in control of your state of mind. Being controlled of your state of mind gives you the power to change it whenever you want. Imagine that you can feel happy, confident, relaxed, or experienced any other positive emotion at will. Imagine you can change the way you feel at will. If you want to do this, then anchoring is the best technique. The way we react can be intentional as well as unintentional. For instance, if you touch something hot, do you quickly pull your hand away, or do you contemplate the action that you need to take? You obviously pull your hand away instantly. This is an unintentional response that is part of your subconscious mind. Similarly, when something is anchored, then your reaction to such a situation will be automatic, and you won't have to contemplate what you need to do. Such an association can be both good as well as bad. For instance, some food that your grandmother cooks can remind you of your childhood. Or maybe every time you pass by a place or see an object, it might remind you of a bad experience. The thing about anchors is that they can both be positive as well as negative. Like mentioned earlier, we create certain triggers unknowingly. These triggers can both be positive as well as negative. It is important to get rid of any negative triggers and replace them with positive triggers. For instance, if you pass by a certain place or wear a certain t-shirt, does it remind you of a bad phase in your life? Perhaps you are out of a bad relationship, and that place or that item of clothing reminds you of those bad times. If you are slouching on the couch for long, does it make you feel lazy and slightly depressed, and then you start to binge on junk food? Well, do you ever experience the urge to binge on unhealthy snacks when you feel low? This is an example of a negative anchor that your mind created. You can create positive anchors, and in the same manner, you can break free of negative ones. Positive psychology is the basis of anchoring, and you will learn about establishing positive anchors in the coming section. Anchoring is a simple technique that will allow you to create or break certain associations consciously. It uses different stimuli like sound, image, touch, smell, or even taste to deliberately trigger a response that is consistent. In fact, knowingly or unknowingly, we use this technique in our daily lives. For instance, brands use anchors while advertising. They use anchors that associate their products with a particularly positive feeling by using pictures of happy people, enjoyment, or even success. The downside to this technique is that it can create negative associations. For instance, if you wear something during a particularly painful event, then you will start to feel uncomfortable every time you wear that item of clothing. If you wear a particular shirt while undergoing dental surgery, then whenever you wear that shirt afterwards, you will be reminded of the discomfort you experienced. Your mind has managed to form an association between that item of clothing and an unpleasant event. Most of the anchors are created accidentally. However, you can deliberately create positive anchors to remind yourself of something good. You can create an anchor in all perceptual systems. You can create visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and even gustatory anchors. A visual anchor uses images that can bring back memories or feelings associated with color that can make you experience a particular mood. An auditory anchor can be a song that might remind you of a specific event, like whenever you hear a siren, you tend to feel alert. Kinesthetic anchors, like a hug or the feel of cold breezes, can remind you of someone special or a specific place. Olfactory anchors trigger your sense of smell. For instance, the smell of a specific perfume can remind you of someone. Gustatory anchors trigger your sense of taste. For instance, the taste of a specific dish can remind you of your childhood and such. Anchoring is used to access feelings, a state of mind, or resources whenever you want so that you can replace an unwanted feeling with something more pleasant. It can also help you control your emotions and reactions. When you can control your emotions and reactions, you can have better control over the situations in your life. For instance, if you are stressed or anxious, then you can use a happiness anchor to access a happy memory that can instantly make you feel better about yourself. Now that you know what an NLP anchor is, the next thing that you need to know is how to create anchors for yourself. There is a simple acronym that you can use to remember the parameters to create an anchor. The acronym is ITURN, which stands for intensity, timing, uniqueness, replicability, number of times. Now, let us understand these parameters to create a powerful anchor. The first parameter that a memory needs to meet, if you want to use it as an anchor, is intensity. If you want the anchor to be powerful, then the memory that you need to use needs to be powerful. All that you need to do is opt for a strong memory and slightly tweak the submodalities, a subset of the modalities: visual, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, and kinesthetic, of the memory to make it intense. The second parameter that you need to concentrate on is timing. The idea is to use an anchor when the happy feelings associated with the memory are at their peak. If you do this, then you will be able to generate a strong response. The best way in which you can perfect the timing of the memory before you use it as an anchor is to relive the memory in your mind. Go through the memory and note the moment when your emotions are at their peak. The third parameter that a memory needs to meet if you want to use it as an anchor is its uniqueness. The uniqueness in this context refers to the stimulus and the meaning that you want a specific trigger to have. For instance, a popular trigger is rubbing the earlobe or someone rubbing fingers together. You can select any trigger that you want, but make sure that whatever the trigger is, you can do it in public without offending anyone. The fourth parameter is replicability. Replicability means that you must be able to replicate the anchor in the same manner that you created it, and it must not be a problem. If you plan to use the anchor in public, or you know that you might need to use the anchor in a public setting, you need to make sure that it doesn't include any inappropriate movements. For instance, the trigger cannot be something like touching yourself inappropriately. The final parameter is how many times you use it. The higher number of anchors you stack, the better. As with everything else in your life, the more work you put in, the better your performance will be. It is ideal to spend about 30 minutes setting an NLP anchor. If you do this, then the anchor you create will be quite powerful. If the thought of spending 30 minutes on this task doesn't appeal to you, then keep in mind that once you create an anchor, you don't have to redo it again. So think of the time that you spend on this task as an investment. However, if you really don't have any time to spare, then you can spend about 10 minutes and create an anchor. But then you will need to spend 10 minutes every week refreshing the anchor. Steps to create an anchor. Now that you know what an anchor is and the parameters that you need to keep in mind while setting up an anchor, the next step is to create an anchor. It is quite easy to create an anchor. Follow the simple steps discussed in the section to create one. Pick a memory. The first step is to pick a memory. Don't just pick a random memory. The memory that you opt for must have strong feelings associated with it. If you want an anchor for confidence, then you need to select a memory of something that made you feel confident. If you want an anchor for motivation, then select a memory that you find motivational. If you cannot pick a memory, or if you feel that you have never felt like this, then you can create an anchor by imagining yourself in a resourceful state. However, an anchor is most powerful if the instance or the memory is something that you have experienced. Association. Relive the memory by seeing it through your eyes. The more vivid and specific your imagination, the better the anchor will be. Close your eyes and reimagine the situation or experience that you want to use as an anchor. Try to experience your emotions as vividly as you can. The feeling. Once you start to experience a positive feeling, create a trigger. A simple trigger is to rub your fingers together. So whenever you rub your fingers together, you trigger a specific memory. The feeling that you want to re-experience needs to be positive. Release. When the emotion you experience is at its peak, release the trigger. It can take some practice, but you will understand what to do after a couple of tries. Test. To break the state, you need to do something completely unrelated for the next 30 seconds. After this, you need to test your anchor. So if your trigger is to rub your fingers together, then when you rub your fingers together, you need to experience the same feelings that you did in your memory. Repeat. To make this work, you need to work on the anchor. You need to repeat it at least 3 times to make the anchor stick. Initially, it might take you a couple of tries to trigger a memory. With a little practice, you can see the results almost immediately. Work on creating a strong association between memory and the trigger.